Section 1010 is still working on the unit circle. However, now we're going to learn how to measure in radians. Okay, so let's just start with this fact. The whole circle is 2 pi radians. So instead of having 360 degrees here, okay, we could have 2 pi. Okay, so then if I were to think about it, if the whole circle is 2 pi, half of that would be pi radians. Okay, so 180 degrees is the same thing as pi, and 2 pi is the same thing as 360. Okay, well, if I take half of 180 to get me to 90, then half of pi would be 1/2 pi, and we're going to call that pi over 2, which is a half. Okay, so now if I were to think about 270 degrees, if the whole thing is 2 pi, 90 degrees is half, 180 is 1, this would be 1 1/2, which would be the same thing as 3/2. So we're going to call 270 3 pi over 2. Okay, so then if we think about it, okay, and we go in half again, so if we were at 90, half of 90 is 45, which means half of a half is a quarter, so 45 is pi over 4. Okay, and I think that should make sense because pi over 4, 45 degrees. Okay, hopefully that kind of helps. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to kind of go ahead and just do all the 45s. Okay, we're going to talk about multiples of 45. So multiples of 45, okay, would be pi over 4. Another one would give me 90 degrees. Another 45 from 90 is at 135. Okay, so now you can kind of see we're 3/4 of a way around to 180. So this is going to be 3 pi over 4. Okay, another 45 from 135 gets me to 180. Another 45 lands me down here at 225. So I'm at 1 plus another quarter. So plot 1 plus another quarter will be 5/4. So that would be 5 pi over 4. Okay, another 45 gets me to 270. Another one gets me to 315. So now I had 1/2, I had 1 whole pi at 180 plus another 3/4. So 1 plus 3/4 is 7/4. So that would be 7 pi over 4. Okay, so all of your middle degrees are going to end in 4s. Okay, so now we're going to go back and kind of do the 30s. Okay, so 45s are all in terms of pi over 4. Now let's go ahead and talk about our other ones. Okay, and those are going to be in terms of pi over 3. So this time, if the whole circle is 360, half of it is 180, okay, and then I were to divide that into the pieces I have here, then, whoops daisies, sorry about that. Oh, I didn't change that. Okay, we'll just leave it at red. So at 30 degrees, this is going to be pi over 6, okay, because we've broken that up into 6 pieces. Okay, so another 30 gets me to 60. Okay, so that's going to be 2 pi over 6, which will reduce to pi over 3. Another 30 gets me to 90. Another 90 from there is 120. So now I had 1, 2, 3, I have 4 pi over 6s, which reduces to pi over 3. Another 30 from there gets me to 150. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chunks, okay, which is 5 pi over 6. So what you're doing is counting in multiples of 30. The next 30 gets me to 180, so that would be 6 pi over 6s. The next one gets me to 210, which is 7 pi over 6s. The next 30 gets me to 240. Okay, another piece would be 8 pi over 6, which reduces to 4 pi over 3. Another 30 from there gets me to 270. Another one from there gets me to 300. So we were at 7, 8, 9. This is 10 pi over 6, which reduces to 5 pi over 3. Another one, which would be 330, which we would now be at 11 pi over 6. Okay, so you're either going to count in multiples of 30 or you're going to count in multiples of 45. Okay, so you're just counting around. So again, I'll count. 30 is the first one, which is 1 pi over 6. 60 is 2 pi over 6. 90 is the next one, which is 3 pi over 6. 120 is 4 pi over 6. 150 is 5 pi over 6. 180 is 6 pi over 6. 210 is 7 pi over 6. 240 is 8 pi over 6. 270 is 9 pi over 6. 300 is 10 pi over 6. 330 is 11 pi over 6. And then 12 pi over 6 is 2 pi at 360. Okay, some of those just reduce. So now if we go to answer our questions, okay, you could either draw that circle or just fill in the table in your notes. Okay. we're going to have 150. Okay, so at 150, which lands on our circle, okay, that was 5 pieces of 30, okay, which is pi over 3. Okay, so if you want to think of it this way, so 5 times 30 gives me 150, and then you just need to memorize that 30 is pi over 6, so this answer is 5 pi over 6. Okay, so a couple ways you can do it. You can kind of do it mathematically. Okay, what is it a multiple of? Okay, and then multiply it by those first two, or you can kind of learn how to count and label your unit circle like we did. Okay, part B, going backwards, 5 pi over 4. Okay, well, that's 5 pi over 4s, which you need to memorize, is 45 degrees. So 5 times 45 is 225 degrees. Okay, or you can look at your unit circle, see where 5 pi over 4 is, and then label the degree. Okay, now the only thing tricky about that is pi over 3 we don't have memorized, but we know that that would be the same thing as 2 pi over 6s, okay? And we know that that would be negative 2 times 30, which would be negative 60 degrees, okay? So if it's not in terms of a 30 or a 45, okay, you can just kind of multiply it so it's a pi over 6. We know pi over 6 is 30 degrees, so that's 2 30s. Okay, and I'm just going to do this for you in case you're getting confused. So 0 was 2 pi, 30 was pi over 6, and 45 was pi over 4. So those are the ones I'd memorize. 90 is pi over 2, 180 is pi, and 270 is 3 pi over 2. 60 is a multiple of 30, okay? So you could count that as 2 pi over 6s, which reduces to pi over 3. Okay, I just count in terms of 30s, so you don't technically need to memorize that one. Okay, so we're mostly dealing in either a 30 or a 45 multiple. Okay, so let's keep going. Now we're going to say, okay, evaluate it when you're at that angle. So this is the same thing as sine of 45, and the sine of 45 is the square root of 2 over 2. Okay, tangent of 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 is 270. Tan of 270 is the same thing as sine of 270 over cosine of 270. So that would be sine down there is the y value. So that would be negative 1. Cosine is 0. You can't divide by 0. So we're going to say undefined. Cosine of 2 pi over 3. Okay, so you can look at the unit circle, or you could realize that 2 pi over 3 is the same thing as 4 pi over 6. So that you realize that that's really 4, and then pi over 6 was 30 degrees. So that's the same thing as 120. Okay, so I can look at cosine of 120, and that's negative 1/2. Okay. So if I try and do negative 5 pi over 6, okay, that's negative 5 pi over 6, which is 30. So this is the same thing as negative 150 degrees, which gets you to a positive 210. And the tangent there is the square root of 3 over 3. Okay. Example H, sine of negative 4 pi over 3. Okay, again, I'm just going to turn that to 8 pi over 6 because I'm only going to worry about pi over 6s and pi over 5s. So negative 8 pi over 6 is 30 degrees. So that's the same thing as negative 240, which is the same thing as positive 120. And sine of 120 is the square root of 3 over 2. Example I is tan of 16 pi over 6. Okay, so this one I would say, okay, does it reduce already? Okay, well 16 pi over 6 would reduce to 8 pi over 3. Okay, so I just divided each of those by 2. So that would be 8. I guess that doesn't really help me. Okay, so if I know the whole circle would be 12 pi over 6, right? Because that would be 12 divided by 6 is 2. So if I subtract that, it's like subtracting 360 degrees. That's going to leave me with 4 pi over 6. Okay, so that would be the same thing as 4 30s, which is 120 degrees. So I need tan of 120, which would be negative square root of 3. Okay. Tan of negative 13 pi over 4. Okay, this time if I'm in pi over 4s, now I would subtract 8 pi over 4 because 8 divided by 4 is 2. Okay, so this is just like subtracting 320. We're just going around the circle multiple times. So 13 minus 8 is going to be 5 pi over 4. Okay, so negative 5 pi over 4. So that would be negative 5 times 45. So that would be negative 225 degrees, which is a positive 135, and the tangent of 135 is negative 1. Okay, so getting comfortable and counting in pi over 6s or pi over 4s. Okay, sometimes, however, we are going to convert things that aren't on the unit circle. Okay, so how you're going to do it is you're always going to multiply by a conversion factor. You've seen this in science. So the top part is the unit you are going to, and the bottom part is the unit you're starting with. Okay, so if we look at example K, convert 1 radian to degrees. So you're going to take the thing you have, multiply it by the conversion factor. The unit I'm going to is degrees. Okay, so I'm going to put 180 on top, and 180 is the same thing as pi radians. Okay, so maybe we should write this down. You're always going to use pi over 180, or you're going to use 180 over pi. It's like multiplying by 1 because the unit stands for the exact same thing. Okay, so it just depends on what you want. I'm going to degrees, so the degrees goes on top. So now we're multiplying fractions, so I go straight across. So I have 180 degrees over pi. Okay, because I'm going to degrees, I never want pi in my answer. So I'm going to divide that out by the decimal of pi. So that would give me about 57.3 degrees. Okay, so every radian is equivalent to about 57.3 degrees. Okay, so example L says take 295 degrees and convert it to radians. Okay, so radians needs to go on top because that's what I'm going to. So 2, think top, so pi over 180 degrees. Okay, put 295 over 1, multiply straight across. So I'm going to have 295 degrees pi over 180 degrees. So my degrees cancel, which they should. And now because I'm going to radians, okay, radians are measured in terms of pi. So you're going to leave your pi, and all you want to do is reduce this fraction. So reduce 295 over 180. Just type that into your calculator. That should give you 59 over 36. Okay. So now we'll try going the other way. So this time I have 7 pi over 12 and I want to go to degrees. Okay, so same thing. You're going to take what you have and you're going to multiply by that conversion factor. If I'm going 2 degrees, this means 180 is going on top, okay, over pi. Again, we multiply straight across. So 7 times 180 is going to be, so that will give me 1260 pi degrees over 12 pi. Okay, now my pi's cancel, so I'll divide 1260 divided by 12, and I'll get 105, and then my degrees stays as my label. Okay, so if you do it right, the unit you want to get rid of should cancel, and then your label for the one you're going to should stay. Okay, again, if we're going 2 degrees, you should not have pi in your answer. Okay, so we'll try n. So we've got 3 pi over 5. Again, we're going 2 degrees, so I'll put 180 degrees on top over pi. Again, I'll multiply straight across, so I'll have 480 pi degrees over 5 pi. Again, my pi's cancel, which should be what I want. 480 over 5 should give me 108, and then my degrees stays. Okay, so I know this may be kind of confusing, so please write down a lot of questions and we'll take some time in a couple of days to go over this as well.